Hello. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Hitchcock, and I want to thank you all for being here today. I'm a member of Richmonders for Peace and Israel-Palestine, the group that is co-sponsoring this event, along with the Arab American Association of Central Virginia, and I'm very honored to be able to moderate this panel today. In 2009, my husband and I got the experience of traveling to Israel and the West Bank to produce a documentary about Israeli and Palestinian nonviolent resistance to the Israeli occupation. It's one thing to read about the situation, and it's another thing to actually go there and see it for yourself and actually get to talk to real Palestinians and get to know them and hear their personal stories about what they experience and the type of oppression and discrimination they've had to endure. Even though we may be hearing about Israel-Palestine in the news regularly, including recently with the unfortunate Israeli assaults on Gaza happening, we rarely get to hear those first-hand accounts from Palestinians in the mainstream U.S. media, which makes this kind of event a really special opportunity. And personal stories have the ability to connect with people in a way that reading about hard facts and statistics often don't. So that's one reason why having a panel like this is an important thing. The Palestinians here today represent Palestinian voices from the Richmond area. We hope this presentation will give you a taste, just a taste of what the Palestinian experience is like. While the panelists all share some similar experiences, they all have their own unique perspectives as well. But for example, all Palestinians have been affected by the Nakba in 1948, the various wars in the region, and the Israeli military occupation that has now lasted for over 50 years. While the panelists have their own perspectives and unique experiences, at the same time, their stories are not exceptional. I would want to point out the Palestinians who agreed to speak with us today. Not all of them have much public speaking experience, so we very much appreciate their willingness to share their stories with us today. Just a few notes on the program. When we say Israel-Palestine, we're referring to the area between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, including the state of Israel inside the Green Line, along with the occupied Palestinian territories in the West Bank and Gaza. Now, Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza, of course, face particularly harsh struggles due to the ongoing Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the blockade of Gaza. But even Palestinians living inside of Israel have many experiences with discrimination and oppression that would be familiar, for example, to African Americans who long faced discrimination in the U.S. In the first part of our program tonight, our panelists are going to tell their stories. Then we're going to follow that with a question and answer session. After the Q&A is over, you may have noticed we're going to have refreshments available, and you're welcome to stay and have further conversation and get more information after the event. For questions, what we wanted to do tonight is we're going to ask that audience members write their questions down on index cards, which are being provided. We have a gentleman right here that's passing out index cards right now. And when you do write a question down, if you kind of put your hand up, then they can be collected. And if you need another one, you can also raise your hand to get another card. In order to kind of avoid duplication and in the interest of time, I'm going to read the questions and try to make sure we get to as many as we can. Okay, so first of all, our first panelist tonight that's going to share his story is Ray Haddad. Ray is a Christian Palestinian whose extended family lived in Palestine during the Ottoman Empire and the British Mandate. He left Palestine in 1948 and lived as a refugee in Lebanon for several years before coming to the U.S. in 1963. So here's Ray.
Thank you very much. Each Palestinian family that has been displaced and dispossessed has probably a different background and history to tell. This is my history and that of my family. I was born in Jerusalem on June 17, 1936, in the Italian hospital when Palestine was under British mandate. Just a word or two about the events that occurred after World War I, which will impact the future of the Palestinian people and how they affected my family in particular. After World War I, the mandate had been given to Great Britain by the League of Nations under Article 22 and by the Supreme Allied Command meeting in San Remo, Italy. Representing Great Britain and the Allied powers, General Allenby entered Jerusalem through Jaffa Gate at the end of the Sinai campaign against the Ottomans on December 9, 1917. Exactly 5 weeks after the Balfour Declaration. He was met in Jerusalem by the local dignitaries, including Salim Hosseini, Rabbi Mashashibi, and other notables and dignitaries. This ushered a new Palestinian era in Palestine. Turkish rule had lasted 4 centuries, with Muslim rule, Arab and Turkish, 12 centuries. Fortunately, Jerusalem had not undergone any physical damage during World War I. This is in a nutshell the events that were occurring and that my parents witnessed at the start of, as they started their family in 1920. Let us also remember that this is the Holy Land for 3 monotheistic religions, Muslim, Jewish, and Christians. Christians have been present in the Holy Land for centuries. The Franciscans, for example, had been named custodian of the Latin Catholic places. Over the years, members of religious orders, missionaries, their supportive staff had come to Palestine. They built schools, hospitals, and clinics. European countries, whether Italy, Spain, Russia, Great Britain, France, and also the US, had an interest in protecting their subjects in the Holy Land and maintaining the status quo in the holy places. I mention this because I and members of my family attended these schools, used their hospitals, met and befriended individuals associated with these organizations, be it doctors, architects, teachers, diplomats, and religious people. Actually, some of our relatives were nuns in one of these orders. My parents were born in Jerusalem, Dad in 1889, Mother in 1899. They married in 1920 and had 5 children. I was the youngest of the lot. My grandfather, whom I did not know, worked at the Franciscan printing press. He died when my dad was 11 years old. And the family and he was the oldest of 6 children. Religious orders helped the family by taking in my dad and his mother Afif. These were German Lazarists, and this is where my dad learned German. And at the age of 16, got a job at the German bank, known as the Deutsche Palästina Bank, where he rose to become assistant director. Later on, my dad worked at the Spanish consulate and acquired Spanish citizenship and started a building material business in Jerusalem and Haifa. My grandmother on mother's side was born in Beirut, settled in Jerusalem, and had 3 daughters. One of them is my mother. 2 of them married Italians that were stationed in Jerusalem. And moved to Italy before World War II. During World War II, Italians and German citizens residing in Palestine were placed in concentration camps near Latrun. My dad, fluent in languages, was asked to be custodian of enemy property and visited these folks on a regular basis to update them on their properties or other matters. We lived in a large house in the German colony, a neighborhood started originally by the German Templars, next to Talbiya and Katamon, which were mostly Christian enclaves, if you will, in West Jerusalem. My mother was a homemaker, played the piano, interacted with friends and relatives. Both of my parents were devout Catholics. I started school in a German kindergarten, founded by Bishop Gobert, and then moved on to the Christian Brothers School in the Old City, near the New Gate or Bab Jdeed. I took bus number 4 from home to get there and packed lunch in a matba'iyya. The brothers of the school were strict. We sometimes received a hit on the hand with a ruler, a muscle. I played with neighborhood children. We had fun playing hide and seek, catch, soccer, and marbles. My mother was a good cook, and I liked to hang out in the kitchen with her. She would take me off into the Old City to buy special items in the Khan Zayd and spice markets, for instance, to buy snails, which we would pick with a needle to eat. While she prepared fresh dough to make pasta, I would help her cut the dough to make tagliarinis. On Easter and Christmas, she made special cookies, ma'moul and ka'b, and I helped her decorate the cookies by pinching the dough. We ate both Palestinian food, a lot of rice and stew, stuffed vegetables, and as well as European fare. A day or two before Christmas, a tree was delivered from the German nuns near us. I used to set up the nativity scene using a crash stored in the attic, made of a wooden frame and covered with papier-mâché. At some point, my 2 grandmothers lived with us, as well as my elderly aunt. My uncle Afif, who had lived in Egypt with his mother and 2 sisters, died prematurely, and therefore the family was moved back to Jerusalem. My older siblings belonged to clubs to play tennis, swim, or go to dances. Occasionally they had parties at home and socialized with friends. I was too young, I guess, to participate in those activities at that time. We did not have a car. On Sundays we would often take the bus to Ramallah, which was cooler than Jerusalem, and sit under pine trees enjoying refreshments at the Odi Hotel. We would also make trips to visit relatives or friends in Ain Karim and occasionally Jaffa, where my paternal grandmother's sister Julia lived with her daughters. On a couple of occasions, we would walk to Tel Aviv from Jaffa and have European ice cream. My brother Hannah worked with my dad. In 1948, a bomb was thrown in a shoebox at their storefront office near the Barclays Bank on St. Louis Street. The glass shattered and my brother suffered superficial injuries from the glass. My older brother, Ferdinand, worked at the Spanish consulate. My other brother was in Beirut at the university, at the St. Joseph University, studying pharmacy. My sister was a boarder at the Sisters of Nazareth in Haifa. My parents sent her to Italy in early 1948, before we left, to remove her from the escalating events in Jerusalem. She joined us back in Beirut in 1949. Life in Jerusalem was becoming more difficult, with the city divided in zones. We were given ID cards. Curfews were gone. We started playing cards at night because we couldn't go out. There was no specific Palestinian government, except perhaps for the Arab High Commission, headed by the Mufti of Jerusalem and made up of different notables. Occasionally pickup trucks with Jewish militias would pass through the streets with loudspeakers, urging homeowners to leave before it was too late. Fear descended on the civilian population. I was too young to appreciate it and continued to play in the garden as usual. People suffered from the illusion that the Brits would protect us and the UN wouldn't let us down. The Semiramis hotel bombing, where several family friends and relatives died, as well as the Spanish consul, and the massacre at Deir Yassin amplified our fear. The perpetrators of these acts are well known and became future prime ministers of Israel. Because of the prevailing chaos, we left Jerusalem April 26, 1948, 2.5 weeks before the departure of the Brits. Terrorist attacks were increasing, and we felt helpless and abandoned. My father rented 2 taxis, took us to Beirut via Damascus and Amman, since the border with Lebanon, which would be closer, was closed at Naqoura. Am I out of time? Okay. My dad, grandmother, aunt, brother John, and I arrived in Beirut and stayed at the German pension run by the Sisters of St. Charles Borromeo. Then we went to Ainab, also run by the sisters. They had a pension there. My oldest brother and the Spanish consul, not the one who died obviously, the Semiramis, another one, stayed in our house, which was run over by Jewish looters, even though they had hoisted the Spanish flag. A Jewish Romanian friend, Mr. Clyde, witnessing the event, salvaged a painting of Virgin and Child, which had been known in the family for decades, eventually found its way back to the family through the German nuns in Jerusalem. We had expected to return within months after the hostilities had ceased. As the days and weeks went by, it became apparent we would not be returning anytime soon. We left the house with suitcases and clothes, leaving behind everything else. After several moves in Beirut, we settled in an apartment in the AUB. By that time, my grandmother and sister came back from Italy. We were collecting rations from Angolo the first year after we arrived. Then my father started working on a commission basis and obtained a license to manufacture a German lotion to treat baldness. My mother would take bottled products to salons and pharmacies and place them on consignment. After graduating from high school with a French baccalaureate, I was successful in the entrance exam to med school at St. Joseph University. During that time, it was all work except for an occasional movie or concert. I had received a grant from the French government to assist in my tuition. I then passed the Educational Council for Foreign Medical Graduate exam that allowed me to come to the States after having a chest x-ray which was negative for TB and getting a visa at the US Embassy for a 5-year period. A year ago, we went with our family and visited Jerusalem and saw our house in the German colony, which was being renovated by a third owner who was adding a third floor. We met the owners and the Arab laborers working there. She was the daughter of a rabbi from Tennessee and was born in Israel. She thought everyone had been compensated for their homes when they left. The New York Times organizes trips to the Holy Land, and you may have read their ads. Usually they characterize the Palestine-Israel problem as a conundrum, meaning difficult problem to solve. I think it's more than that. It is a tragedy that befell the Palestinian people, Muslims and Christians alike. I think the Palestinians were sold out, trusting others rather than planning ahead. Perhaps current leaders can learn from the past if they ever end up negotiating for a solution, which at the end of the day, they might not feel just. What is justice anyway? Palestinians are not treated well in Arab countries where they do not have the same opportunities and are sometimes exploited for political reasons. Palestine is not the only unsolved problems. Palestinians are not the only suffering people when we think of the Muslim Rohingyas in Myanmar and the Muslim population in northern China. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray, for sharing your story. Very powerful story going back to early days. Next we have Lena Jarada. Lena is from a Gazan Palestinian refugee family, and she's an avid traveler and adventurer who also has been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and has recently ridden her bicycle across several western U.S. states to raise awareness for empaths. So thank you, Lena.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ray, for sharing your story. That was very powerful. Can you guys hear me okay? I don't know if I'm supposed to speak into the mic. So my name is Lena Jarada. Jennifer introduced me, thank you. So I'm going to kind of tell you guys the story of how I came to America. I think probably the youngest on the staff here. So my upbringing is definitely a little bit different as I'm an Arab American. So mine's kind of the story of like really two wars that have impacted and really shaped really who I am today and how I came to be, and I'd say heavily like my experience in terms of how I view the world. So I was born in Kuwait in Al-Ahmadi in 1989. We grew up there for probably about a year and a half, 2 years. 1989 is also known as the time of Gulf War, if you're from America. So very naturally, my parents decided, during a war and having my brother that was just born that, they didn't really want to raise kids there anymore. So ironically, we had applied for visas, tourist visas, to go to Budapest, Hungary, where to really just visit like our uncles that had lived there. So we very conveniently got our visas around the time of 1991, and were able to actually go to Budapest. So we would actually live there for about a year and some change. I went to preschool there. I did know the language fluently. I personally had a great time. We went there with really close family friends too, who were also in the audience, so thank you guys for being a part of our journey. What I found out later though was that it really wasn't all that fun for our parents. My dad and Bassam did stay longer. It was really difficult. Apparently, they were one of the few countries that accepted refugees during that time. Similar to how the world is shaping out now, when refugees do come to a country, they're kind of like frowned upon. So they kind of had more prejudice growing up to extend the time that we could kind of stay there. My dad and his really good friend applied to the university to get an associate's degree, to get a student visa. They both did finish it successfully, so congrats on having I don't know how many degrees now, because they also have their master's and with the PhD as well. So after that, we luckily were able to go to America on asylum refugee. For those that aren't really familiar with the process, because I feel like a lot of people are gonna kind of get slapped in the face just for the sake of education, you actually can't apply for it before you get here. So how that really works is you take kind of like a huge leap of faith and you just kind of like, we're just gonna go on a plane and see like what happens. So we had family in Mankato, which is in Minnesota. My uncles live there on my mom's side. There are, clearly some perks of having a generalist family. There's some downsides too. This is more of the perk side. So we came here, we were granted asylum and refugee. I have been here since preschool, and I actually didn't even get my American citizenship until I was a junior in college. So to put that in retrospect, that's about 21 years. It's a really long time to go through the entire process. And so we came to America, we kind of lived there with my uncles for a little bit, and my dad came to Richmond because his uncle lived over there, so they kind of helped him get a job in Richmond and kind of get situated. So afterwards we would move there. Time to hold it was about the time that I could start kindergarten, so that September I would start kindergarten. My mom fought for me not to be in English as a second language English. I found this out like very many years later. I'm personally grateful for that, but you know, I guess technically was supposed to be in that class. I think I have pretty good English now, maybe not the best word count, but maybe it's two, because it's pretty far. So that's kind of the reason that we came to be, and I guess the whole reason, like for the asylum refugee and all of that, is not every country gives you a citizenship if you're born there. So I guess the complications that came about it, and you know, all the jumping of the hoops and everything is essentially because my dad's family is from Gaza. My mom's family is from a place called Shweki. So when Palestine was divided in like 1948, literally just depending on luck of the draw, where your family was from, specifically your dad's side, you either got essentially a citizenship if the country decided to give it to you, or you did not. So Shweki was an area controlled by, or like recognized by Jordan, so they were given Jordanian citizenship. Gaza was not. I guess it was owned by Egypt, and they just gave you travel documents that said you were a human being, and essentially if the country wanted to accept you, you would just have to apply for visa at that country, and they would either take you or not. Which is why we had to apply for visas conveniently for the visa testing, and then to America later. So a lot of that, you know, is really just like luck of the draw. And so since Palestine is not a country recognized by the UN, you do not get a Palestinian citizenship. So you can see why, you know, obviously having an entire family without, you know, like immigration paperwork, aside from being an asylum refugee, causes complications very quickly. That's almost like 2 generations, right? So that's like my parents' generation that was impacted, which then led into their kids' generation being impacted. I'd say I'm pretty lucky. You know, I went to college. I've traveled a very good amount for someone that has an American passport for only 9 years. I've been to 5 of the 7 continents. I've seen numerous like natural wonders. I've traveled a pretty good chunk of America, specifically after this bike ride. I've gone really the entire ways and seen the whole East Coast and West Coast now. And the West Coast very intimately on a bicycle. I've seen how it shapes like homelessness in our country. I've seen food deserts. I've also seen the richest of the richest and of course the poor. I think I've seen a pretty good chunk. And I'm also very lucky to have a college degree from a very prestigious school. So that's been pretty lucky. So that's kind of like my story and how we got here. So I don't know, I'd say for, if you guys see people, I think it's because of that it's kind of shaped me to kind of always remember the little people. I always think it's really important to hear everyone's story. I don't really ever make judgments or assumptions. You just never really know something like background. So for those immigrants coming in, or when people get really angry, like Mexicans or Latinos, it's really hard to kind of drop your life and just come over here, specifically if you have a family. So just kind of like think about that, So I think it's like worth kind of hearing them out, see, why it is that they're doing that. You can't really, just kind of put yourself in their shoes, literally, So I think it's probably pretty hard, especially if like families are very broken up and like moms are staying with them and dads are like, just kind of taking literally like a chance. Yeah, so that's my story, that's how we got here, and thank you very much for hearing it.
Thank you very much, Nina, for sharing your story. And next we have Susie Mary, who is a nurse whose family is from the West Bank near Jerusalem, and who lived over there for several years before settling in the Richmond area a few years ago. So this is Susie.
All right. Just like she said, my name is Susie Mary, and I'm an American Palestinian. I was born and raised in New York. My parents are both from Palestine. We come from a village called Beit Hanina, and it is north of Jerusalem. Both my parents were born and raised there. Now, our village was occupied by the Israeli forces during the 1967 war, which when it was occupied, it was split into two parts. We had the eastern part that now was a part of Jerusalem, and the western part that was a part of the West Bank. And so during that time period, Palestinians struggled. I mean, people left their homes and, stuff behind, thought that it would be a couple of days before, or weeks, and they can probably return back to their homes. Well, that wasn't the situation. So when my mom, fasting forward, my parents got married in 1982, they decided to immigrate to the United States due to the economic and financial burdens that they faced from the war. So they immigrated, came here to New York, where my dad worked in a local convenience store with a friend of his to try to, better their financial and economic situation that they were facing back home. And also he had his family, his mother, and his brothers and sisters that he was, responsible for taking care of back home. When we were young, my mom always made it very important to always talk about Palestine, to always make us aware of our culture and our traditions, and instill us in our roots. So growing up, I always, couldn't wait till the day I can go back and see what such a beautiful country it was. So in 1994, my parents decided to take my siblings and I back overseas to live there for a while, to be able to, get to know more. We heard a lot of stories, now we get to see what it's like to be there, because it was such an important part of our life growing up. Going back there overseas, of course, when my parents left and they immigrated here, they lost their residential status. So after 3 months living there, you're considered an illegal alien. So there's a lot of parts that are ruled by the Israeli territory that you're not allowed to enter, and there's borders that you would always cross by every day, back and forth. 5-10 minute commute would turn into like an hour or two. So it was really difficult. After the 3 months, we had to move from our hometown, which was Beit Hanina, to a village closer to in the West Bank part of it, because we didn't have any legal documents, and we would get stopped. And of course, if we were caught, we would be sent back to the United States. Even though we were American citizens, we got treated very badly just because we were Palestinian. There was no respect, whether we were an elderly, a child, a pregnant, whatever the situation was. They really made it miserable for us to be able to enjoy our stay there, or live there. I lived there with my mom for 8 to 9 years, so my middle school and high school years there were pretty tough. They weren't your typical middle school, high school experience here. Oftentimes we would go to school not knowing whether we would make it back. I mean, a lot of times we couldn't even get to school on time. We would miss classes, we would miss, our teachers couldn't make it because they were stopped on the, they were stopped and, forbidden from making it to the school that day. We would hear gunshots, we would gas bombs. It was a struggle, and it was very, oftentimes, very dangerous. And a lot of times I thought, like, we would go to my mom and tell her, you need to take us back to the United States. This is dangerous. We're going to get killed. So living there were a lot. I've seen a lot. We were able to learn a lot about our country. But it was definitely a struggle, and I was able to experience firsthand the struggles that Palestinians faced every day, on a day-to-day basis. So after that, I got married, came back to the States, just like my mom did with me. It was very important for me to teach my kids about Palestine. I didn't want them to forget that we're Palestinians, we're from that country, and I just wanted them to stay close in touch with their country, with our roots, and learn more about the religion and the traditions. So in 2015, I took my kids back to Palestine. Upon entering the airport, I was taken to a small room that you would probably fit 5 or 6 people in, and I sat there for a good 2-3 hours before they told me why I was being held back. They investigated, they asked a ton of questions. I had my 4 children, I had a little baby at the time, 9 months. They didn't care whether, the kids were hungry. We had just got off for like a 14-hour plane ride. And, we're investigating, they were thinking whether, why are we entering the country, who are we visiting, and all that stuff. So that was really difficult on the kids because they weren't used to that. We're not used to getting stopped when we go from Chester to Richmond and ask why we're coming to Richmond, or what are we doing here, or who are we going to see. So that was tough. Upon going there, we stayed with family we stayed close in Beit Hanina, so we were close to Jerusalem. I stayed there, and it was kind of a little bit easier for me because we had our passports that enabled us 3 months to kind of go back and forth, but still with that, we had to stop at the checkpoints. One day I remember when the first time we were trying to go from Jerusalem to Ramallah, that's probably like a 10-15 minute bus ride that turned into like an hour and a half. We had to stand in line in like little chicken coops. I had my son when it finally was my turn, and my son wasn't walking at the time. It was 10 months. I remember standing there showing the Israeli soldier my passport, telling her this is my son. And, I can't let him go walk on his own. He can't do that. I remember her yelling and screaming in Hebrew, which I kept on telling her, I don't understand what you're saying. My kids are scared. They don't know what to do. She insisted on letting me keep a little 10-month infant little boy crawl from one side to other on his own over the gravel, crying and screaming, and just proceeded to stand there and look at us and laugh. That was really tough on my kids. I mean, I lived there a couple of years, so I was kind of used to the struggles, but for them, it was really hard for them to stay there and see firsthand how Palestinian people are treated on a day-to-day basis. My husband wanted to come visit, so he came I think a month later. My husband came, and of course he had the Palestinian passport, so even then we were in the same country, 10 minutes away from each other, but he wasn't allowed to enter our village, which was closer to Jerusalem, because he carried the Palestinian passport, and therefore he can only stay in the West Bank. So going back and forth, we had to seek other back roads, dangerous roads. Oftentimes we would try to travel at night to for him to get, there was one time where, thank God, we were successful in getting him over, where he got an opportunity to go to Jerusalem and pray in Al-Aqsa Mosque that night. But it was definitely a struggle for us Palestinians being there. The struggles that Palestinian people face on a day-to-day basis is just really, you can't even imagine. I remember when we were staying there with my mother, stuff like water and electricity. We would only get water twice a week, and we would know that we can't waste it. There's only a certain amount of water we could use. Electricity would get cut off every now and then. There's no respect for humanity there. Hospitals are always understaffed. So as a nurse working here, I see how our hospitals are well equipped. We have doctors, we have nurses, we have what it takes to take care of sick people. Back there, oftentimes the hospitals barely have the basic equipment to take care of the people. So people are sent home, sent away. And even when conflict arises and people are wounded, they barely have the basic necessities to stabilize these patients and take care of them. So my hope, I hope with me sharing this experience and sharing my story and continuing to talk to people and raise awareness and instill it in my children, I hope to end the Palestinian struggle. I hope for freedom and justice for our generation, for our young generation to be able to carry this forward, and for Palestinians to regain their rights and live in peace one day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susie, for sharing your story. And before I introduce our last panelist, I did want to remind everyone, if you do have questions and you have the index cards, if you write down your questions there and you kind of hold up the card, we have some people that can come around and collect them. Because after our final speaker, we will have time for a Q&A. So, without further ado, our final panelist is Adib Abed, who came to the U.S. at age 14 from the West Bank in 1967, thinking he would just stay for a few months while the dust settled after the 1967 war, but he's been here ever since. Adib's grandfather was a U.S. World War II veteran, and Adib has been advocating for Palestinian rights for many years, and he previously owned his own business in Hopewell, Virginia. So here's Adib.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone, for coming to hear our stories. Thank you to the panelists. It's tough to come after everybody else with more compelling stories. But we as Palestinians, we all have a story to tell. And I want to start my story prior to 1948 and before the creation of Israel. Put it in proper context, I attended an event at VCU last week. There was a lecture. The speaker was Dr. Robert Vincent, and the title of the lecture was Beyond Jamestown, Why 1619 Matters in African and Atlantic World Context. And my takeaway from the lecture was, he said that it's not really fair to discuss African American history starting in 1619 as slaves, because prior to that, they had family connections, they had a culture, they had a history, family ties to go back to, a whole humanity that we tend to ignore if we start from 1916. And with us Palestinians, if we start with the Nakba, the catastrophe of 1948, I think we miss a lot. Because our history did not start as being refugees. There is a human element that we will miss if we start there. And I thank Ray for shining some light on that. And without further ado, I want to start with my name. My name is Adib Mahmoud Johar Abdul Hadi Ali Muhammad Ali Muhammad Al-Hajja Al-Halis. And that's how we trace our roots back. That comes, my name, the last person in the name, Al-Halis, is traced back to Hebron, and before Hebron, it's Gaza. So before there was a Bir Nabala, before there was an Israel, there was a family. There was a history, a culture that's rooted deeply in the land in Palestine. And I want to just touch a little bit about the names and where my story began. I'm going to take you on a little journey from the days that my grandmother met my grandfather till today, and how that affected me, and the events that shaped my life. So there was this young man, at the age of about 18, 19, getting ready to get married. Somebody tells him there's a young woman of married age in the little town of Suba. And he grabs his uncle with him, and they walk from Bir Nevada to Suba. And the reason I mentioned Suba in particular was there is a video outside that if you, during the reception, take a look at it. That's my grandmother's village. When they approached the village, they met with a young woman tending to her cows that were grazing. And they asked her, do you know where so-and-so's house? And she looks at them, and she was kind of smart. She figured it out, what they're coming there for. She said, my dad is not going to give you my sister because we need her for the harvest time. No, you don't need to go there. He's not going to give her to you. And so just tell us where the house is and don't worry about it. So she goes and shows him the house. And not knowing, by the time they got to the house, because of their interaction with this 14-year-old, the young man tells his uncle, that's the one I want. Don't ask about her sister. So it came to pass that they got married and they lived in Bir Nevada. My grandfather came to the United States in the late 20s, early 30s on the lottery system. And the easiest way to show appreciation for the country that adopted him and to get the citizenship and the benefits is to join the army. There is a war coming on. So he joined the army, the medical corps. He served in the United States Army and died in 1943. He is buried in Buffalo, New York. My uncles and my dad started traveling to the States in the late 40s, early 50s. They would come, spend 2-3 years, go back home, spend a few months, build something, do something. If they're not married, they'll get married. Then they'll travel back. And there's this back and forth travel. So when my dad got married, it was in 1950. My brother was born in 1951. My dad didn't see him. He just waited till he made sure the wife was pregnant, and he had to come back to the States to make some money. Well, he comes back 2.5 years later, meets his son, and sticks around for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, because I was kind of stubborn. My mom couldn't conceive with me right away. She had a bunch of multiple miscarriages. So my dad had to stick around a little bit longer. Make sure the wife is pregnant, heads out. He comes back 3 years later. He meets his 5-year-old and 3-year-old. And again, by that time he had built a house. I was born in the new house. My brother was born in a one-room adjacent to my grandmother's house. But I was born in a new house that my dad built. I was in the bedroom in the north side with the midwife and the whole story. That's a whole other story. He sticks around for a few months, comes back to the States, wife is pregnant, comes back home. Well, now the 5-year-old is 8, the 3 is 6, and there wasn't a kid that wasn't born. There was a 3.5-year-old daughter, and she was a pistol. She was tough. So my dad wants to show off one day and go hunting. He loves to hunt. So he grabs his rifle and tells Mom, come on, let's go with me. Go hide birds and what have you. He wants to show off. And my sister said, I want to go with you. And he said, no, you can't go with me. He said, no, I'm not going with you, I'm going with my mom. He said, but I'm your father, and I tell you, you can't go with me. And my sister looks at him and she said, no, you are not my father. He said, yes, I am. She said, no, my father is in the living room. And she pointed to a picture that's hanging in our living room of portrait size of my dad. I said, that's my father. You're not my father, you can't tell me not to go. So my dad gets really upset at the whole situation, and my sister gets a whipping. And at that moment, at age 6, 7, I made a decision that I will never go to America. This faraway place that's keeping my dad away from us, that we don't know him anymore. My sister got whipped because she just said the truth. No, I will never go to America. So every time somebody mentions America, and they will say, you're going to end up in America anyway, because once you finish high school, you're going to go to college, and that's only in America. And somehow I recognize the value of an American education. And I will shoot back by saying, no, I'll go to the American University in Beirut, I'll go to the American University in Cairo, but not to America. No way. And that continued until 1967. There was drums of war were beating, and I took it very seriously. I would listen to the radio. I have a transistor radio, not the size of the telephone, but one of those big ones that has 6 batteries. And I'm always listening to different radio stations. And I heard instructions, I believe it was on Sawt al-Arab, which is an Egyptian radio station, instructing people that are close to the borders to build shelters. And they gave instructions on how to build it. So if you get bombed, you will be safe. So here's this 14-year-old listening to the radio. I said, okay, I'm going to build a shelter. Damn it, the war is coming. I'm going to do my duty. So I went and I built the shelter. Took me a while, but I did. And people laughed at me. Said, this kid is crazy. War is not coming. This is just talk, this nonsense. Sure enough, in June, I'm finishing with my shelter, putting the final touches on it, and I'm listening to the radio. And war has broke out. I carried the radio. I don't know, I was so happy because I was vindicated. I had no fear because everybody told me it's not going to happen and you were crazy. I ran up to my mom and said, hey, the war has started, and the war has started. And by that time, I was the man of the house. My brother decided at age 8, after the 8th grade, at age 15, that school was not for him. And he wanted to go to the States, so he came to the States with my uncle 6 months before the war, or less than 6 months. So I'm the head of the household. I'm in charge. So I said, the war has started, Mom. So they told my mom, my aunt, my grandmother, and the neighbors. And when evening set, everybody decided that they're going to sleep in my shelter. And I said, wow, my shelter would not hold that many people. It will hold maybe 6 at best sitting down. So everybody came and they looked at it and said, no, we can't do that. It's too crowded. We'll sleep under the trees next to it. And if there's any bombing or anything happens, then we'll all go down into the shelter and we'll just squat in there. It will hold us. We had about 15 or 20 people. Even the neighbors came. They wanted to be protected by my shelter. That night, nothing happened. We had a few flares. And as soon as the flares lit the sky, everybody said, oh my God, no, we need to leave, abandon the shelter, because now the airplanes will see the shelter and see us sleeping around it. They think it's a military encampment and they will bomb us. So we need to leave. So we moved from one place to another. Every night we moved to a different place. And finally we settled in our garage, Makhzan, actually, it's on the sub-level, the lower level of the house. We stayed there till the end of the war. Then, a month, 2 months later, the talk started. I would hear my uncle, my mom, my grandmother talking about going to the States. I said, no, this is nothing worse could happen. go to America? No. And I said, no, we have to, because things are in flux here. We don't know what's happening. It is not safe for you to be here. My one uncle that was in Nevada said, I am not going to take responsibility for all of you people. I can barely take responsibility for my own family. You need to be with your father and your brother. You're going to have to go. And it's going to be temporary. 6 months at most. There's a UN resolution 242 that calls for Israel to withdraw, and things will calm down. 6 months, you will be back. That's the 6 months of the latest. I didn't buy into it, but I didn't have a choice. 14-year-old. I don't think anybody took my opinion. And if they heard it, they didn't take it very seriously. On our way to the airport, my grandmother is walking with me. My grandmother walked on a cane. She's holding on to me, or I'm holding on to her to get to the taxi. And I said, Grandma, there's no need to get upset. Don't cry. Because it's going to be only for 6 months. And she looked at me and she said, Daddy, do you know where you're going? I said, yeah, I'm going to America. Those who go to America, they don't come back. I mean, in 6 months, not in 6 years. Sometimes they never come back. If I see you again, that will be a lesson from God. And out of all of them, she was right. She knew what life is all about. I saw her one more time here in the States. She came to visit. We got to the States. We landed in New York, then drove to Chesapeake, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia, actually. My dad has an apartment for us. It was, I still remember the apartment number, 256 Tatumstown Road, Chesapeake, Virginia. I went to school, entered the 8th grade. It was a lonely time, tough times. No one ahead of me to guide me. Pretty much was thrown in a situation, swim or sink, live or die type thing. You're it. And we didn't have what we have today, the social media and connections that you are in touch with the entire world. No, we weren't in touch with anything. And muddled my way through my 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. Before the 10th grade, we moved, actually, 10th grade was my last grade in Norfolk. Something happened. My life started to take shape, and the events started to control what I do and how I live my life. The first was the 6-Day War. And one day we were watching TV, the nightly news. That's the only time you get to watch to see the news at 6:30 p.m. And there was a report about the Battle of Karama. Karama is a little refugee camp across the Jordan River. It was in 21st of March, 1968. And there's this Palestinian movement. We heard about the PLO being formed, but we never heard anything about it. Then there's the Palestinian fighters, along with the Jordanians, repelled an Israeli attack on the camp, and the Israelis suffered more casualties in the 2 hours than they suffered during the entire 6-Day War. So that's a battle the Palestinians, along with the Jordanians, have won. And until today, it's disputed who actually did most of the fighting, but I think it was a collaborative effort. Because the Palestinians claim they're the ones that gave Israel hell, and the Jordanians claim the same. But there was a report about Palestinian training and youth being involved and all that. I didn't think much of it, but I started thinking, okay, I am not there to be one of those Fideliyin cubs, the fighters. I'm in the States. What can I do? And there's got to be something that needs to be done. What do? And that kept playing in my mind. And I talked to some of my cousins. That's were my friends. I have another cousin that was a couple of months older than me, and another cousin that a couple of years younger than me. That's because of the travel time for our fathers. He's the same age as my sister. So we talked. We need to help the people that their parents are in prison. We need to help this, we need to do that. But we just talked. Then we moved to Richmond, Virginia. And a few things happened in Richmond while I was there. In 1970, there was a multiple, September 6th, I believe it was, a multiple hijacking of some planes by one of the Palestinian organizations to Jordan. And all you hear is Palestinian terrorists, Palestinian terrorists, Palestinian terrorists. And some of my friends in school, I was at John Marshall High School. Are you one of the Palestinian terrorists? Hey, what is a Palestinian terrorist? Just by being a Palestinian, I'm a terrorist? This is crazy. But that's the only thing you heard. So I decided that I wanted to do something. There was a few African American friends that were publishing like a monthly newspaper called BIDI, B-I-D-I. So I said, can I write something for your paper? They said, sure, yes you can. So I wrote, who are the Palestinians? And yes, we have some Palestinians that commit acts of violence, but not all the Palestinians are terrorists. And if any Palestinians resort to a violent act, it's because of hopelessness. They feel they have nothing to lose. So it's important to know who these people are. You will label them terrorists, that's okay with me, but you need to dig deeper. So that was one event that got me thinking more. So, okay, we need to do something. So in 1972, the Munich massacre, that was a horrible event. And the results were equally horrible because of the killing of all the athletes and all the Palestinians that were involved in it. It was just horrible all the way around. And again, the story repeats itself. Palestinian terrorists, Palestinian terrorists, Palestinian terrorists, Palestinian terrorists. So I wrote an article to the Richmond Times-Dispatch, the editorial page, saying, okay, we just need to know who are these Palestinian terrorists. That was basically who are these terrorists? Where they come from? There is a story before they became terrorists. There is a story before they became refugees. There's a human element that we're missing. And I took it and I carried it to the Richmond Times-Dispatch and in person. Walked in, and I asked to see the editor. He let me in. He said, that's the man right there, son. So I walked up to him and said, hi. I said, what can I help you with? So I have a letter for you that I wrote. He looked at it, he read it. He looked at it and said, it'll be in tomorrow morning's paper. So that's another event that got me thinking. So in 72, along with my cousins, I said, okay, we want to start an organization, and our purpose is to help the children and the families of Palestinian prisoners who are in Israeli jails or in Jordanian or other Arabic prisons. The three of us. And they said, yes, sure. And we wrote a page and a half, whatever you want to call it, bylaws, statement of purpose, manifesto. We wrote it, typed it, and we agreed on it, and we called our group Youth for Palestine. That we're supposed to help other youth and other kids there, that their family, their parents, or not their parents, their fathers, it's either dead or in prison. But that's how far we got with that organization. We wrote that page and a half. Nobody ever saw it except my cousins, and myself. So then, I finished high school in 3 years, instead of the usual 4. Graduated from John Marshall, went to VCU, and I ran with everybody that will say the word Palestine. I'm there. There is a demonstration, I'm there. There is a function, I'm there. My high school graduation, my gift to myself was a 1 week in Washington, D.C., where there was a place called Palestine House. I ran with guys that were either finishing their PhDs or finished their PhDs. I mean, this 17, 18-year-old that was running around with them. That was what made me tick. 71, I got married to an American woman. Hell broke loose with the family. The biggest mistake you can do. Not get married to your cousin. So anyway, I traveled to Denver, Colorado. Attended some classes there. 73 war breaks out. And PBS puts on this Israeli apologist that talked about how bad the Arabs treated their own people, treated their own armies, treated, so horrible people. So the best thing that happened is that the occupation is the best thing that ever happened to the population there. So I belong to the Organization of Arab Students, or Arab Students Organization. I called the station and I requested an equal time to counter what this woman said. Sure enough, I wish I could get that kind of response nowadays. And the guy was very forthcoming. Sure. So I went. And I had a full half an hour interview on that program. And that was interesting. The first time I see myself on TV, and I'm sitting down watching it 2 days later, because it wasn't live, it was taped. And a couple more years go by. I worked with the students, Organization of Arab Students in Denver. We did a lot of things, a lot of demonstrations and stuff like that. In '75, I came back to Virginia. I worked with Kenny Shoe Store, managed a shoe store, and lived in Norfolk. And another major event that affected my life was August 12th, 1976. And August 12th, 1976 was the massacre of Tel Zatar, where 4,200 and some odd Palestinians were massacred by the Lebanese right-wing phalange. At that time, I said, you know what, it's time to do something. Being Palestinian, just because of the distance away from the rest of us who are suffering, doesn't excuse you. It doesn't give you an exemption from doing what you need to do. And at that time, I knew of organizations that I worked with, that Palestine Aid Society and Association Najda, which is Association Aid in Lebanon. So I said, you know, let me explore the possibility of volunteering, but it has to be very specific with the people of Tel Zatar to help the survivors of Tel Zatar. And I was able to get that commitment. And 2 months later, I was in Lebanon with the people of Tel Zatar, the widows and the orphans and survivors, the wounded. I spent 2 years there. And they were the most enriching 2 years of my life. I got to know real stories of sacrifice and suffering firsthand. And that makes your commitment that much stronger. And 2 months after I left, my wife here filed for divorce. So before the 2 years that were out, I found another purpose for my life, the love of my life, my wife Anita, came back to the States. So I came back as a winner. In the meantime, between all these different moves and different jobs, as an Palestinian American, we always fell back on something called peddlers, salesmen. My father did it, my grandfather did it, my uncles did it, my cousins did it, and I did it. We will sell whatever we can find that we can make a deal on. We will sell material and bed spray, tapestries, transistor radios, jackets in the winter, and it's something to fall back on. My 2 minutes are getting close. No problem, thank you. I'll rush through it. So I did that in between all of my other jobs, something to sustain me. And also I worked in construction. Then in 1985, bought a store with my brother on Jeff Davis Highway. We called the store Quick Stop, and next to it there was a bar and a pool hall. We named it appropriately the Thirsty Camel. So we did that for a few years, but that wasn't my thing. Because when there is a Palestinian event in DC, who cares about the store? I will leave, and I have to go and do that. On this occasion, the commemoration of the Tal al-Sata, we would have demonstration in downtown Richmond on Main Street. It took 36 hours for the massacre, and me being the organizer, we have to replicate the 36 hours, and we will stand out taking shifts for 36 hours. So then I got an offer from the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee to work for them in New York City as the East Coast Regional Director. So I jumped on that opportunity, said, hey, if I can make a living doing what I like to do anyway, and be of some significance, make a change, why not? So I went and worked with the ADC. My office was in Bay Ridge, and I worked with, during the war, the Iraq War, the first Gulf War, I was one of the founders of the U.S. coalition against U.S. intervention in the Middle East. I was one of the co-chairs of that coalition, worked with Ramsey Clark and a few other organizations. And traveled to Iraq in 1991, immediately after the war, on a fact-finding mission. I was head of a commission of inquiry as to the war crimes that were committed against the Iraqi people. And then I'm running through these things pretty fast. In 1992, actually in the end of 91, after the first Intifada, when the Palestinians and Israel met in Madrid, and they met in Oslo, the Oslo Accords. My son was reaching his early teens, he was 13, and I felt the Oslo Accords and the Madrid conference were basically short-sighted, and I'm not going to produce anything for the Palestinians. And I did not want to become antagonistic to the Palestinian movement, but I could not support that particular ventures, and I needed to take care of my family. So I came back to Virginia, bought a store in Homewood, Virginia, 5 Forks Food Mart and Deli, that still exists till today, but I don't own it. And spent 24 years there, put my kids through school. That was the goals for my business. My objectives were to own a house and to put them through college until they say they don't want to anymore. So 2 years ago, I looked at my wife and I said, you know what, I'm selling the store. She said, why? What are you going to do? I said, it doesn't matter. But I'm not going to set new goals because that becomes a slippery slope. Kids are done with school. My son graduated from Michigan Law School. My daughter finished her master's at VCU. They're both married. They both said we don't want to go to school anymore. And my daughter from the previous marriage also put her in school, through nursing school. She said, I don't want to go anymore. I got my RM. I don't want to go anymore. I said, you know, and we have a house that's bought and paid for. I don't have a mortgage. And the kids are done. And on top of that, the icing on the cake, I own the building of 5 floors. So I'm done. I'm selling the store. And I sold the store at age 62 and took early retirement. Then before that, in 2012, I formed, along with some other friends of mine, another organization called the Arab American Association of Central Virginia. I know the 2 minutes are being stretched. And the reason I formed that organization is to give the Arab American community a sense of community, to be involved in our politics, local politics here, to effectuate change. And you cannot effectuate change from the outside. You have to work from within in order to be counted. And a friend invited me actually to a meeting for Richmonders for Peace in Israel-Palestine. I attended that meeting and we've been working together ever since. In conclusion, I just want to say that in order for us to achieve our goals, we have to truly be engaged at all levels. There is no issue that is too minute to be important or too big that you can't tackle. You have to get involved. You have to go and get involved in your community, and you have to get involved with other communities. And I see the solution for the Palestinian problem is definitely a one-state solution. There is no room for 2 states. The reality on the ground dictates that no matter what anybody else says. You have 6.5 million Jews that call that piece of land home, and you have 6.5 million Palestinians who are in that piece of land. Not counting the Palestinians who are outside. That's all that is that home. So until we all recognize each other's right to live as a human being, and the burden on the Israelis, because they are the ones in control. They are the occupiers. They are the victimizers. They have to come to grips with the reality that the Palestinians deserve what every Jew deserved, or what every Jew got in Palestine. To be able to send their kids to equal schools, same schools, to drive on the same road, to have the same job opportunity, not to be denied entry to see my mom just because I'm involved with American leftist organizations. Verbatim. That was the reason given to me in 2003. After going and coming 5 times in 10 years from 1993 to 2003. Why entry is denied? Oh, you're active with American organizations. That's a threat to them. That means I must be doing something right. Then, 5 years later, after making multiple attempts to return, and every time I get denied, Finally, in 2013, I was allowed in, but through the Jordan River, through the Alamo. And when I was asked, why did you come through the Alamo Bridge, I looked at the interrogator and I said, you know what? Because I don't trust you. If you were to deny me entry, I can call my mom and my sisters that come to Jordan and I can visit and see them. But if I come to Tel Aviv and you deny me entry, then I have to turn back and go to New York City. JFK, that's where I am. And this is my story. I still go see my mom. And definitely there is hope. But hope alone is not enough. It needs work. You need to get involved. And I thank you for coming. And if there's any other questions, I'll leave it to Jennifer. She'll take care of it. We'll see you outside.
For sharing your story, and thanks again to all the panelists for being willing to share your stories today. I think some of you have some questions on index cards. If you would, I think it maybe pass them to the end of the row. We have some people coming around to collect them. If you haven't written a question down, but you're thinking of one, you can still do that. And when you have it, if you want to just hold it up when you see one of these young people going around, they will collect it for you. As I said, I'll try to get to as many questions as we can. We do want to save some time for the refreshments and the mingling afterwards. So let's see, and we will go ahead and, let me go ahead and take this off. Okay, let's see here. Now, some of these questions are for particular panelists. If you did not specify a panelist, then I will just pose the question to the entire group. Here's a question for Ray. You want to start? The question is, what was the general feeling between Jews and Palestinians, or Christians or Muslims, before the 1948 Nakba? Now, Ray, if you like, you can sit down and I can just pass this microphone, yeah. Be a little more informal for the question and answer. So how did everyone get along, basically, prior to 1948?
Well, I can speak for myself and my family. We lived in a section next to Rahabia and Talpiot, which was Jewish. We would venture to Zion Square because they used to sell hot dogs, which I love. They used to sell something like tiras, which is corn, which was boiled in a big barrel, and they would put salt on it, and we liked that. I would go to buy shoes at Freeman's, which was on Jaffa Road in the Jewish section, and to check the size of your foot, they would put it in an X-ray machine. I thought that was funny. We did socialize very much with the Jewish population in the sense that it didn't come up, but I mentioned the Talbis who established the portrait of Madonna and Child, for instance. My father dealt with other Jewish merchants, and we didn't feel any animosity with the Jewish population per se. And all I can say is that, my family, this is before 1947. Then of course, when the terrorists started and the fear fell, and we felt that, the horizon was getting dark, it didn't look like there was any realistic solution coming from at least the Arab side. The Zionist organizations were very well organized, better prepared, in my judgment. But we didn't have any animosity towards the Jewish population. That's all I can say. I mentioned going to Tel Aviv to have ice cream at Bill's Ice Cream. It was Viennese ice cream. and we love to do that. So we frequented Jewish merchants, and we didn't think anything about it.
Thank you, Ray. All right, I've got some other questions here. I'm trying to kind of avoid duplications and get to as many. There's a couple that kind of are related, and it doesn't say a particular name. Thanks. So I kind of will pose it. This applies to, I think, some people more than others. Someone was asking about a little bit more about the complications of being a refugee and travel documents. How that works and what it means to be stateless. Someone else had asked about the lottery system, so people are wanting to know a little bit more about that. I know, Nina, that was part of your experience. I don't know if you want to answer, or if anyone else wants to say anything too, you're welcome to.
So I'd say for me it was kind of like pretty interesting. So I didn't really, I guess, fully scope or like understand it until I was probably about middle school. I think one thing that specifically sticks out for me. So I grew up knowing English and Arabic hand in hand. So I speak Arabic fluently and I know English fluently. I don't have like a recollect memory of when I learned Arabic. I think it was just always there. I think what's interesting is you didn't really realize how big of a deal until we would do mock elections in U.S. history class, and then we'd have a ballot, and the very first question on it is, are you an American citizen? I knew we were not, because we would have to go to the doctor, do paperwork, or do visa stuff, or go to Norfolk and take days off. You know, it just seemed like a little odd, but you're little and you don't really think much of it. So I put no, and told the teacher that, and then quite literally in front of the class of like about 30, she's like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm like pretty positive. And she's like, and immediately was like, well, where's your mom born? And I was like, not here. She's, you know, we grew up in Kuwait. I was literally not born in the U.S. And she's like, well, where's your dad from? And also similarly, like not born in the U.S. And, you know, I'm getting like pretty embarrassed as like a really shy kid, and I didn't really think that much of it. So I went home and I asked my parents, like, what does that really mean? And then specifically, like that next year was September 11th, right? So then it became, if you were an Arab, they're just trying to keep on the DL, or like not say much about it. So I learned I couldn't ever go see my grandparents. They'd have to come see us. We couldn't leave to go see them. We had family overseas. I never really got to see my aunt until I got my American citizenship, so I didn't really go there until junior year of college. It's kind of just what it means if I had a job, I'd have to show them like my green card, right? So I learned we had alien numbers and all that. It's kind of like a really complicated process. You have to hold your green card for 5 years. If you, like, pretty much you really couldn't leave. You know, if I wanted to go see, I guess, my aunt or something, we'd have to apply and see if we were allowed to leave, and realistically, probably would have been denied, to be quite frank. And so, I guess, growing up, for me, it wasn't too difficult, but I'm sure for my parents, not being able to see their family for 20 years would be a lot more frustrating. So I guess that's how it kind of like impacted me. Anyone else want to touch on that? Yeah.
All right, thank you. Let's see here. I have a couple questions that are overlap and relate to you all's opinion on recent events. So 2 related questions here. What do you think of the recent attack on Hamas leadership? Although I don't think it actually was an attack on Islamic Jihad, I think, right? But the attack on Palestinians in Gaza, and then also related, how should we respond when Israel retaliates 2 missiles from Hamas? I guess I'm not sure if this is asking, you know, what do we say in response, or what, I'm not sure which person's asking, but there's 2 different questions about recent things. And Dee wants to talk first.
Before we talk about the missiles from Hamas or from Islamic Jihad, we need to talk about
what is going on in Gaza. Gaza is under siege for the last 10 years. Nothing goes in or out of Gaza without Israeli approval. And they don't approve anything. They don't approve food. They count calories for the entire population. The entire population of Gaza gets the bare minimum of food to stay alive. That's what's allowed into Gaza. They're not allowed to travel. Somebody gets sick and needs to be treated in the West Bank, not even in Israel or outside, in the West Bank, in Palestinian hospitals. To get a permit, to get a tasriyah, to travel for medical care. The numbers of people that die before they get that tasriyah is incredible. There is no infrastructure, there is no education, there is nothing happening there. And let's put the responsibility where it belongs. People in Gaza are like fish in a barrel. They can't, and Israel could kill at will as many Palestinians as the Israelis have the stomach for. And they have proven that they're capable of doing it. Yes, there's some missiles, they call them, fired from Gaza. How many casualties? How many Israeli deaths? From this recent wave of Palestinian missiles? 0. Not one. How many Palestinians killed? Civilians? A family of 8? A family of 4? Children? 34 dead, 200 wounded. You go back to the last 2 years, the right of return demonstrations where people march to the border and stay away from the border. They just want to make a point that we can see our land. And Israeli snipers pick them off at will and videotape it and put it in social media and brag about it. 200 children plus. This is what we need to talk about. When people are oppressed and they lose hope. When you lose hope, you resort to violence. If the Palestinians in Gaza were given the opportunity to live, they would not support any actions of that nature. And I think this is a fallacy to take an isolated, they killed the leader of Islamic Jihad. The leader of Islamic Jihad was in a building, targeted killing they call. But you read the names of those people that died in that building, it wasn't just this one person. You take the number of civilians that were killed in Gaza over the last 10 years. A solution has to be made. And the solution is the Israeli government and its backers have to understand that the Palestinians are deserving of life. They deserve to live as human beings, just like everyone else. They're not something less.
Feel free, because if anyone else wants to talk, you're all welcome to. Let's see. I have a couple questions here about y'all's thoughts on solutions. So there's some overlapping questions about the future, what type of solution, whether you support a two-state solution or what other kind of solution you all would personally recommend, and how do we get there? Would someone like to start? Would you like to start, Ray?
Yeah, I'm a pessimistic by nature, so this problem in Palestine doesn't change my nature in any way. Actually, one has to ask whether the people in Islamic Jihad and Hamas are being well fed or not. In spite of all the events that the bombs are hitting Gaza, I think there is a lot of corruption in the Arab authorities, whether be it in Ramallah or elsewhere.
Perhaps you start the hearing now? The mic's too close.
I think there is a lot of corruption and lack of recognition of realities by the Palestinian authorities. And this problem has been festering for the last, 60, 70 years? And nobody wants to take the first step. I used to work for ANMIRA, American Near East Refugee Aid, on the medical committee a few years ago. And yes, there was difficulty getting medications to Gaza. For example, if vitamins were sent from the Netherlands and the expiration date was too close, they would let the medication stay in storage areas and then give them problems to move it to Gaza. But overall, 10, 15 years ago, it was much easier to get stuff into Gaza, and I think it's getting more and more difficult. And I don't think the rockets fired from Gaza on Israeli cities or towns, where they do very little damage and are amplified by the press as if they're attacking Israel. What can they do to Israel? They can't do anything to Israel. So they have to face realities and take steps to negotiate, even if they feel that the solution is not up to par. It wasn't up to par in 1947 during the partition. They refused that. It wasn't up to par later on. They refused, as well as the Israelis, by the way. They refused the various commissions that came to Palestine to establish troops. It is also true that peacemakers were killed by Israelis. Count Folk Bernadotte was killed in July of 1948 by the Irgun or the Lehigh group because they didn't like his attitude towards the Arabs, feeling that he was perhaps more sympathetic to their cause. Lord Lemoyne was killed in Cairo. He was a friend of Winston Churchill, who was furious about the death of Lemoyne. He was killed again by the Shamir, Irgun, Begin group. But nothing happens after that. So what if Churchill gets upset? What did he do? The Palestinians fester in camps. They are taking advantage by politicians, and nothing happens. So we have to wake up and have a different approach. I don't know what the approach is. I think a one-state solution would be the one, but I don't know. I think it has to be solved for the poor people that live in camps and are exploited by politicians.
You all want to say something else? If anyone else wants to grab it on the way down about solutions in the future?
I think when things get really complicated, that means they are really, really simple. That's why they get complicated. People complicate them because they deny reality. The reality on the ground that the Palestinians have to face is there is no second state. There is no place to establish a Palestinian state left. Because when they agreed to that state to start with, it was on 22% of the land of historic Palestine. Then, during the last 25 years, while they're negotiating, Israel's official policy is creating realities on the ground to preempt the negotiations, which means expansion of settlements, and the word settlement is really misleading.
And it's getting worse and worse.
It's expansions of these colonies. There are huge cities with infrastructures and schools and swimming pools and hospitals. And this settlement is 30,000, this one is 40,000, this settlement block is 100,000. And the land that goes with the settlement, the land area around the settlement that gets confiscated, the road systems that connect the settlements, you can't use it if you are not a Jew. You can't use the land next to the road that leads to the settlement. 250 meters in either direction. So what's left for this mirage of a state is few enclaves here and there, Buddhistans. We're familiar with the term. That was done in South Africa before. Ramallah will become its own entity. Hebron is its own entity. Nablus its own entity. On 8% of the land area, and that's the Palestinian state. Its sole purpose is to protect and legitimize the occupation. This has been, in effect, what the PA's role, the Palestinian Authority's role, ever since Oslo. It is the protector and legitimizer of the occupation. So I see the solution is for the Palestinians, which we have. There is the beginning. There is a beginning movement where someone like myself can sit here and talk openly about the uselessness of the current leadership. And this is going on in all Palestinian communities, including in the West Bank and Gaza. And there's a lot of Palestinians that are being arrested and jailed by the PA. Because they talk similar to what we're saying here. But that's a good sign. And at the same token, the right of return for the Palestinians, this is something we cannot ignore. We cannot pretend, we haven't talked about it a lot at this event, but the Palestinian refugees, they have a right to that land. And in my simple mind, I like to simplify things, the solution is there. The solution is in Israeli law. The Israeli law that's called the law of return. When a Jew lands in Tel Aviv Ben Gurion Airport, he's asked, do you want Israeli citizenship? And if he says yes, fill out an application and it's automatic. Well, I think this law should apply to the Palestinian refugees and their descendants. Do you want to return to Palestine? And if the answer is yes, it's automatic. Then the rest can be worked out. Once we agree to the concept, like I go back to what I initially said, that we all are human beings with equality and equal rights, and we deserve the same thing because we all yearn for the same thing. What we are going through as Palestinians now is what our African American brothers went through in the United States prior to the Civil Rights Act. Palestinians who lived in pre-1967 Israel, you go into any Palestinian town and you know you have entered the Palestinian town. Because the infrastructure is decrepit, it's fallen apart, it's not progressing, the school system is not getting the funding that the school system in the neighboring town of Jewish only. The medical care is not the same. So they're living under racial discrimination based on ethnic nationality there. In the West Bank, it's a lot worse. It's incredibly worse. My sister used to live in Beit Hanina, and to walk from Beit Hanina to Bir Nevada to our house, it's a 10-minute walk. 10-minute walk. After 2005, 2006, when they built that apartheid wall, it's 2.5 hours by car. Because she has to go to Ramallah, and from Ramallah to Kalandia. Kalandia is a checkpoint, an international border, international crossing, international not by our standards. You get out of a taxi or a bus, and you go through some cattle chutes. I think the FDA will have problems with these kind of chutes for cattle in the United States. I've been through them a couple of times. You get intimidated. You get allowed in or turned back at the whim of whoever's standing there, an 18-year-old from Brooklyn, New York sometimes. And they ask you, when they look at your ID, what are you coming here for? Where are you going? What's your name? Where is your mother? Where's your father? And this is similar in all crossings. Going into Israel, this is my last trip. They look at my wife's passport. She's born in Beirut. And the 18-year-old, 20-year-old behind the counter there, how come you were born in Beirut? How come you were born in Beirut? You're Palestinian, you're from Palestine. And God bless her, she said, because your grandfather kicked my grandfather out. I was born there because we're refugees. Have you ever heard of refugees? Until these things are ceased, these kind of treatments are ended. And there is hope with something like the BDS movement, Palestinian civil society. That's what we need to look at and to look forward and for leadership and for guidance. And we need, as Palestinians, to call for leave us alone to the PA. We need to ask them to disband themselves before the Israeli government disbands them, because Israel will disband them. They're moving in the direction of a one-state solution. It's just a question of what type of state. The Netanyahu government and the Israeli Zionists moving towards a one-state, an apartheid state, where you have one group ruling and controlling the lives of another. This is what we're looking forward to, and this is what's happening. Unless we preempt them by declaring that the DA is no longer willing to do their dirty work and to be the protector for the occupation. Then the Israelis take the responsibility for all that area.
Before the time is out, I just wanted to say one other thing. I stopped my spiel in 1963 when I came to the United States. But since then, I'm married, had 3 kids, then 2 of them are here, and I appreciated my opportunities in the United States for continuing my education, changing my visa status, and I reiterate and agree with what Adib said. Everything he said is absolutely true. The differences between he and I, perhaps, are the approaches that whatever approach the Arabs have taken in the last 70 years has failed. And something else has to come up, something new and different.
All right, we are running a little short on time, but I do want to give Nina and Susie a chance. And the question was about what your thoughts are on what you see as possible solutions in the future. There was another question here, because Adi brought it up about the BDS movement. Someone was asking what people thought about that. If you all want to respond about your thoughts on solutions and BDS, and then after that, anything else anyone wants to add that you think hasn't been said.
I mean, this could be, I've always been like a very optimistic person, maybe to the point where it's like slightly naive. But I guess like just kind of like food for thought. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it out there that I think both sides are in the wrong with certain things, to be quite frank. And I'm not gonna say one is like a little bit worse or one is a little bit more correct. At the end of the day, it actually doesn't matter. So I think in order to actually move forward, I would have to really just ask like where do people put their foot down and start forgiving each other and just kind of start moving forward and start building something there. Because if you're going to always look back at your past and be like, well, you did this or you did that, then I'd say you're really never going to get anywhere, right? If Germany was able to kind of rebuild itself after, having concentration camps or the Berlin Wall, and they're doing, pretty well, they did save like Greece from like the crisis. Are there ways that we can just kind of like as humanity kind of look at the bigger picture and be like, all right, regardless of who was more incorrectly wrong, how do you move forward from that? And I think until really people start forgiving, kind of loving each other, as cliche that sounds, I don't know if really anything will really ever happen. So optimistically, yeah, I think both people could live together if they really take the time to learn and kind of see each other as people. But if not, then I think the answer would be no, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. Because we are short on time, and we do want to leave some time for everyone to get a chance to mingle, and you're also encouraged and welcome to talk to the panelists more when we leave in a minute and enjoy some lovely refreshments. I did want to go ahead and take the time to thank everyone. I wanted to thank the panelists for sharing your stories in such a public forum. We really appreciate it. Also, thank you to all of you for coming out to listen to the stories today. And I want to thank also the UU Church for letting us use this space. And for everyone here, if you're interested in learning more about the situation in Israel-Palestine, Richmonders for Peace in Israel-Palestine also hosts a film series in the spring, and you can find out more information about that out in the lobby here. You can also find out more about the organizations Richmonders for Peace in Israel-Palestine and the Arab American Association of Central Virginia. There's also, remember, there's some artifacts we have from different parts of Palestine on the table out there, some videos to watch if you're interested, and we encourage everyone to take a chance to talk more with the panelists or with any of our other organizations right now. We'll have refreshments going on, I think, until about 5 p.m. So thank you so much.